Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog Fantasy. Code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy will get you a deposit bonus of up to $250. And if you're wondering how to play on Underdog Fantasy, check out Mayo Media Network. I just released a big strategy video as an intro to NFL Best Ball for 2024. Stacks, rankings, strategies, what you should be doing in the different contests that maybe that you want to go in. Some of them take 45 minutes, some of them take 10 minutes. You're going to want to pick the ones that are tailored to you and what you want to do. Plus, we're going to have a ton of pick'em content coming your way. But this is part 4 of the division preview series that I've been doing with Jake Ciely from theathletic.com. We're doing the NFC West today, Jake. We've already done the AFC West, which if people see the thumbnail for that, it might creep them out. I thought it was hilarious.
I think my wife thought it was hilarious. That's all you need to know. Again, kudos to the team that you have over there with the most amazing Photoshop jobs I've ever seen in my life. I actually looked at it and it took me some time. You're like, man, where does this begin and where do I start and where does Kelsey start? Really well done. I am glad though that you weren't put on Taylor Swift's face. I think that would have maybe gouge out my eyes.
It was a discussion. Realistically, what we didn't want was backlash from the Swifties because they're out in full force.
Your entire viewership would have went down by 50%. You got canceled because of the Swifties.
Just a lot of negative comments. We released a few shorts that were talking about the election, but they were very apolitical things. It was just funny stuff that we've been seeing, and we almost had to take them down. The comment section, such a cesspool of this isn't what we're talking about. You guys need to calm down a little bit.
Wait. I think my biggest takeaway is the fact you actually read the comments.
They popped up on my, we started getting so many of them. I'm like, how do we have 99 plus new comments? Where the hell is this coming from? And it was all from this one video that we put out. It's oh geez. This was supposed to be a joke. It was supposed to be kind of funny, and people were not having it.
And now you know where to go to Engagement Farm. There you go, Pat. There you can start that.
It's too much of a headache. I can't do it. Don't want to do it. What I want to talk about is these divisional previews and going team by team and talking about the coaching changes and what we might expect for this season. If you want to run projections for fantasy football, for Underdog Pick'em season long, for future props, whatever it might be, go to runthesims.com right now. It's completely free for the season long projections, and they're completely customizable, making it very easy for you to tinker around. So if you think that Joe Burrow is going to be the MVP this season, well, you might want to go fiddle with his stats a little bit to see what they actually come out and who the biggest beneficiaries are of that at runthesims.com. You just need an email. Now, if you want the Sims, the DFS product for in-season, use code Mayo. Get yourself a discount. But you don't need to do that in order to access all of the rankings and projections going on player by player right now. So, Jake, we're going to kick off with the Super Bowl losers, the San Francisco 49ers, currently minus 195 to win the NFC West, meaning you would have to wager $195 to win $100 for people who are unfamiliar with how odds work in that sense. Their over-under at the moment is 11.5 wins. That is juiced to the under. So you actually have to bet $100 to win 105 on over 11.5 wins. The coaching staff remains basically intact from last year. Kyle Shanahan is back. Kyle Shanahan is going to continue to call the plays. So that's good news. And it seems like they're going to get stuff worked out with Brandon Ayuk, and he's going to be back.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest question. For fantasy and actually real life, if you take away a piece like Brandon Ayuk, I think you're going to have to look at a considerable you can't take away what is arguably a top 15 wide receiver and not say the offense might have more troubles, even with Christian McCaffrey. I'm looking at their schedule, and honestly, yeah, I think that they are the favorites to win the division. But if I was going to bet anything on them, because what you just said where the money was juiced, I would actually hit for the over. They had 12 last year, and it's not like this schedule is scary at all. Yeah, they have to face Miami and Buffalo, but you still also get, maybe the Jets are better, but that's right out of the gate at home. I don't see them losing to the Jets at that point. You get New England early, and then you look at the rest of the schedule, and yeah, Kansas City's in there. Dallas is because they won a division. But the rest of it is it doesn't look threatening where I can see them repeating 12 wins.
I could see it too, although I actually think this division as a whole is weirdly better, and San Francisco dominated the division last year. And that just doesn't usually hold up year over year unless you're the Brady Patriots, where you simply go 5-1 or 6-0 in the division every year for 15 years and call it a day. Like Arizona being slightly better, like weirdly enough, the Kyler Murray-led Arizona Cardinals have given the 49ers not necessarily like complete fits, but they've played them very competitively, even when they haven't been good.
You're not wrong there. And I think that, I mean, you look at it, so what did they do last year? What were they, 5-1 in conference last year?
They were 12-5 overall, and they were 13-4 overall the year before that. Just to take a look at their game by game. Let's see, in division
they
last year.
They lost to the Rams last year.
Yeah, which they didn't care about. So you can almost like write that one off. They beat the Cardinals. They beat the Seahawks. They beat the Seahawks, and then they started out really well. I mean, they're all their yeah. I mean, they lost to Minnesota in that weird Monday night game, but they had some problems with the AFC North, as I recall. Like they lost to the Browns, they lost to the Bengals. I can't remember if that was a Joe Burrow game or if that was a Jake Browning game. Either way, they've just kind of dominated the division last year. And usually, when you're that familiar with a team year over year and not much changes, yeah, they could run the table in the division, absolutely. But I could see them going 4-2, and then the win total gets a bit more specious.
It does, and I definitely don't disagree with you. So for everybody, just for clarity's sake, it's just if I was forced to choose because that's a tough line, I would actually just take the side where I can get the better line on it. I honestly, as a whole, it's a tough one to pick either side because, as you said, you could just change 1 or 2 games, and that's going to be the difference in just winning 12 or winning 10.
Well, amongst the favorites of all of the divisions right now, like Kansas City is a -230 favorite to win the AFC West, and we've already went over that. Check out Mayo Media Network if you want the division previews, the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. They're all up there in audio versions as well. They're already out. You can check them out. Please do. Smash a like while you're there as well. But then the 49ers are the second biggest favorite. And, I mean, the Chiefs mess around so much now during the regular season. I wonder if, and maybe the Niners have more to play for because they've lost to the Chiefs twice in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs just kind of get there and then turn it on in the playoffs, that they're kind of doing that like mid-run of the Patriots where it doesn't seem like they take football very seriously until November. Maybe that'll be different for the 49ers because they keep coming up short, but they seem like a pretty safe bet to win the division. And the odds at -195, I mean, they could win this division at 11-6, couldn't they?
I think they could, and that's what I'm going back to the schedule and looking again. I mean, you finish things off with the Rams at home in Week 15, at Miami, home to Detroit, at Arizona. So, I mean, you can look at that 2 different ways. You could say, unless they are already really at the cusp of 9-10 wins, that's a tough finish to, want the 12 on top of it. You say, if they are in the fight for the division and just up by 1 game where, they can't afford to lose to the Rams or, don't want to rest people in Week 18, you could look at that way, too, is that they're going to try and remain competitive through the end of the year. I think the worst-case scenario for their win total, again, I'm solidly with winning the division. Outside of Chris McCaffrey injury, Brock Purdy even at this point injury or something like that, they should win a division even with the Rams arguably being even better. Everything you mentioned too before.
That's where I would push back, and we'll talk about the Rams next. Obviously, you can hit the time code, but I think the Rams are going to be worse.
I actually think they could be better because you have a healthy Cooper Kupp for the entire season, and I think they made some changes on the defense that should help make it more stable than it was.
Weirdly enough, I think that on paper they may actually be a better team this time around, but it felt like everything kind of broke their way last year. That just natural regression will have them with a worse record, even if they are a better team.
Like how broke their way though? Because you're talking about an unhealthy Cooper Kupp for half the season.
Sure, but even when he was healthier towards the end of the year, I don't want to say that he's washed, but he was very clearly not one of the 5 best receivers in football anymore.
Right, so that's where I'm saying, that's where I was saying, I don't actually think everything broke right for them. That's what my pushback
No, but
is.
they really punched above their weight class last year, it felt like. And I was
for what things should have been when you're looking at the loss of Cooper. Okay.
Like
I can see what you're saying.
But even like just getting this historic Puka season out of nowhere. Kyron Williams becoming a guy. Even when Stafford got hurt and he missed 4 games, they were able to tread water in those circumstances as well. It's a lot. I mean, they're better than the Buccaneers, but almost how the Buccaneers, I feel like, hit the absolute apex of what they could have done last year and probably this year as well. Like, they just punched above their weight so much, it seems almost impossible to do that again.
I can see that. I still think there's an opportunity for them to be better, but I think to get deeper in the discussion is something that I was going to say when we got to the Rams is I feel like of the 4 teams, they do have the largest range of outcomes. Like I think Seattle's going to be competitive. If you told me they won 14 games, I would be like, you're stupid. There's no way that's happening. Like my point being about Seattle is like, I don't see them only winning 5 and I don't see them winning 14. I could see the Rams winning 12, or I could see, to your point, things just going sideways. Stafford gets hurt again and misses more time this year. Maybe Cooper Kupp is washed, where their range of outcomes is 5 wins or 11. And then we go to Arizona. I think Arizona is definitively better, but I still think that Arizona is not ready for the playoffs, and they're going to kind of hover in that 5 to maybe 8 or 9 win range. So that's my point. Is I think the Rams of all 4 teams has the widest range of. You could tell me either thing happened and be like, hey, you know what? I could see how that did happen. But I think it's as likely that they're better than they are last year than it is that they're significantly worse.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I'm with you. They went 10-7 last year. If they get to 11 wins, sure. I can absolutely see that happen.
Even 12.
Even maybe 12. I feel like a lot really needs to break right. But a lot of it has to do with, I think that Seattle and Arizona are better than they were last year. And that is what's going to hurt the Rams.
Okay. And that's fair.
So anyway, let's get back to San Francisco. In terms of fantasy prospects, obviously Ayuk is going very high. McCaffrey's the number 1 pick overall in fantasy. I don't think anyone's really disputing that. The big question I have is, where do we take Brock Purdy? Because I rode Brock Purdy for a pretty substantial part of last season. After Anthony Richardson went down, like he was just kind of on the waiver wire, I pick him up, and dude's just good every week.
He is. And if you're just talking about like projections, and now you can do the same thing as you mentioned over at Run the Sims. My biggest issue with Purdy not being where, so my projections, not my ranks, just check them in as QB 13. The biggest thing is Purdy doesn't run. You're looking at it very much like a CJ Stroud. Could he have a CJ Stroud season? And like now we're talking about both of them inside the top 5 or 6. Absolutely. But it's going to have to all come in the passing game because you're only going to get 100, 200 yards, a touchdown or 2 on the ground. So if Purdy, which I think that now we're away from 2 years ago and the hot takiness of who Brock Purdy was. I think that now more people are being reasoned and saying when you're talking about Brock Purdy being inaccurate, and I put that in quotes because it's relative to like how you want to describe it. Inaccurate is not necessarily like, oh, he's trash. Like he does throw a little bit off target. Like if you look at off target percentage as a whole, he still ranks inside the top 10, almost top 5. But his weapons and the offense put him in a great situation to succeed. It goes back to something that you and I talked about for as long as we've been together. We talked about when Michael Thomas came out of college, and I said the Saints were the perfect fit for him. There's a lot of teams Michael Thomas would not have been Michael Thomas on. Brock Purdy is not Brock Purdy on half the other teams in the league. But Shanahan and his weapons make up for that where he can be a little bit off target. It's not like he's throwing 20 yards away from where his target is. It's just a little bit, and they succeed. So I'm with Brock Purdy, but I'm saying that to say is if he just has like a slight decrease and all of a sudden he throws 24 touchdowns and everything is a little bit more Christian McCaffrey, which already was a ton. I'm just saying it's hard for me to invest in him if people are going to start coming on board with you and I and others, and you start pushing Brock Purdy to like QB 9 or 10, then I'm going to be out just because it has to be so much on his arm.
So I look at Brock Purdy right now, in my projections, I have him at number 13. And that's 293 fantasy points. That's 2 fewer than Jordan Love.
I beat you by 9 fantasy points.
But what I'm saying is that's 3 fewer than Trevor Lawrence. That's 12 fewer than Kyler Murray. That's slightly ahead of Tua and Caleb. I think Tua is kind of the direct comp to Brock Purdy in this situation. And when you take a look at their ADPs, just Brock Purdy is probably going to go later because Tua has like buzz around him, and he has like the superstar weapons, although Brock Purdy does as well. But I just think you're going to be able to get him for pretty cheap. Like if you punt on quarterback and don't take one of the elite guys, he's just in that tier with everyone else, and he's likely to go last of them.
And it's going to be a value pick. I mean, you're talking about all that in that range. I mean, honestly, I don't want to say like he is the safest, but you know, I think the better one is where I would go is even Jared Goff because I like his throwing more than I do like Tua's.
Okay, yeah. And they're all going relatively around each other and project out about the same. So whatever route that you want to take to go to where you think you can maximize the points, that's probably where I would go to. And it's not like Purdy doesn't run. He actually ran a lot more towards the end of the season in the playoffs. That's just not I mean, when it's on the line, he's going to take a dive at it. Much like I would try to comp it to, he's not as good of a runner as Aaron Rodgers, but you would see that the later on in the season, like in vintage Rodgers seasons that we got along, like he would start running a little bit more for those 4-yard first downs instead of just absolutely trying to make everything happen in the backfield. He would just kind of put down his head and get there. That's sort of the runner that I see Brock Purdy as.
I was actually going to go all the way back to much smaller size, but Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
And that kind of like just put that head down and get that few extra yards and then potentially a touchdown or two.
The problem with the 49ers, so obviously McCaffrey's going number 1, Ayuk is going at wide receiver 12, pick number 18, Debo is going at pick number 21, wide receiver 16. If you had to, I'm never a Debo guy in fantasy football. I would just prefer the safety week to week to Brandon Ayuk. And I really think McCaffrey hurts Debo's upside.
I think he does too, but I'm not afraid of Debo at 16. Like my fear of Debo is where he's like 10, 11, 12. And it can happen. But like all it takes is a Christian McCaffrey injury, and that's how we play some backup running back picks. But Debo could be going back to top 5, 6 value at wide receiver if there is no McCaffrey. I agree with you. You're right. And let's not forget either, and I know we haven't brought him up yet, but George Kittle wasn't 100% for a lot of last year, and he's still the only tight end with 1,000 yards. So it's like everybody can eat, and I put that on quotes so like everybody's like, oh, there's so many mouths to feed. But there's a cap to where if everything just repeats, there's just a cap. There's a ceiling of where Debo can get to. One person getting hurt, missing half the season, everybody's stock is up. But I think that whether it is Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, or Kittle, I think the biggest beneficiary is Debo, no matter who gets hurt, unless it's Debo. And that's why I like him at 16, because I feel like 16 is almost like not his floor, but pretty close. Like I feel like that's the safe point of him, and it's just all upside there.
And maybe it's perception, but I just feel like the week-to-week consistency of Debo just is mind-numbing. Like, it's just not a guy that I like to draft. Best ball, sure, because you don't necessarily have to count him every single week, and those big weeks are going to be awesome. But it just feels like Ayuk he scores points every week, and usually double digits, 15, 16, whatever it's going to be, whereas Debo could go from like 8 to 30 week to week.
Yeah, he could legitimately go, I think, 2 1 week? Like, he could go down that far. I'm okay with him, though, as my wide receiver, too. And I think that's where he is. Now, granted, depending on how your draft goes, he might be your number 1, but I have a feeling you're going to come back real quick with a number 2 wide receiver if he is your number 1. But I'm okay with him there because what's the big difference between like a DK Metcalf where 1 week is 3 and next week is 24? And so I have no problem as wide receiver 2. It's going to come down to team construction. Obviously, you brought it up. Best ball is the best case scenario, and I actually just clicked on it to look at his game log there. Oh, there was a 0. Actually, I think he got hurt. Didn't he get hurt against Arizona? That's why he has a 0.6. But then he had a 1.1 against Cleveland. He's got a 8, 7, 7, 3, 4 in there. But then he has 33 and 22 and 30 and 20. So you're not wrong about the volatility of him.
Who do you think is going to be the 3rd wide receiver on this team?
I don't even care.
You don't yet.
I really don't. I think it is Juwan Jennings, but I really don't care.
It's not Ricky Pearsall.
And he's blocked. I mean, it could be next year. And I think Pearsall was more of a let's possibly, if things happen trade-wise. But again, after that point, nobody was thinking they were going to trade after night 1 of the draft. But Pearsall feels more like, all right, Debo's gone, or maybe we don't keep Ayuk and we do trade. He's like next 2025 and beyond. I think, again, if somebody does get hurt, I think the uptick is to who's already there. And then people are going to, like, let's play it this way, Pat. Week 5. Ayuk goes down. Rest of the season, I don't even think Juwan Jennings or Ricky Pearsall would be my number 1 wide receiver at that point, because I'd be like, yeah, go get him. But if somebody's going to drop 60% of their fab, I just wouldn't do it because I think it's going to be a boost to Kittle and to whoever didn't get hurt. And then you're still going to get inconsistency from that 3rd option. It's still the 3rd option.
If McCaffrey goes down, how good is Elijah Mitchell? Or is it like, is there a ceiling to that where it's like, yeah, kind of good, but not as good as you'd think?
So I think it's probably not as good as you think, mostly because I think Garendo is a perfect fit for the Shanahan offense, and I think that he could push Mitchell before long. Like, this feels like one of those years where it's finally like we've hit the end of the backup, and now it's the next guy. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that, and I would be aggressive to go after Mitchell. He's proven himself before. But you know what? Garendo feels like the Mitchell who was the one that got hurt, and like I feel like we talked about it that year, and it ended up being Mitchell. Was that the year? Was it? Everybody thought it was going to be Trey Sermon and it was Mitchell.
I feel like everyone drafted Trey Sermon one year, and it was just Elijah Mitchell.
And it was, and I feel like that might be the case. And of course, Elijah Mitchell's not hurt, and he's not bad like Trey Sermon. But I just feel like there's more of a threat to Mitchell this year than there has been before.
Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Supercharger, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. All right, well, let's move on to the Los Angeles Rams. I mentioned them previously that I don't think they'll be as productive this year as a team as they were last year. They are currently plus 330, the second favorites in the division to win the NFC West. So if you wager $100, you win $330. And their win total right now is 8.5. That is juiced heavily to the over of 8.5 at minus 155. So you have to bet $155 to win 100 on their over. Puka is going super highly in drafts. He is pick number 10 overall. Cooper Kupp is pick number 29. Kyron Williams is pick number 30. Blake Corum is pick number 116. And then Stafford, if this team's going to be amazing, they have 3 picks inside the top 30. Their quarterback is pick 152.
We do this every year, Pat. We talk about it, like, especially if you're talking about projections, there has to be, it's like waterfall, whatever you want. The numbers have to add up. Like, you just can't be like, oh, Puka and Cooper Kupp are both top 10, number 1 wide receivers, and yet Matthew Stafford is QB whatever 20 something. The only thing that does help that argument is I do think that you could say Matt Stafford caps at like QB 16 or 17, even with those numbers, because it's so funneled. That's where you could go with it. Because even if Demarcus Robinson is a thing again this year, like he was once he came to this team, because we all know the Rams run 3 wide more than anybody else, and they continue to do so more than anybody else, is Higbee's banged up. I think the tight end position could become irrelevant for them this year. And with that funneling, you might get Demarcus Robinson with some value. But again, you could say Stafford plays all 17 and still only finishes at QB 15, despite the fact Nakua and Cooper Kupp are both wide receiver 1s. But that's only just because he doesn't run.
Really. Yeah. The lack of running is tough, and it's a lot like the old Oakland Raiders situation with Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree, where the top 2 are probably going to combine for a target share of 60%.
Yeah. Like, I have Stafford with almost 4,500 yards and 28 touchdowns, and he still barely checks in as a top 20 quarterback just because of that, because the rushing is 48 yards. So
I got him at 59 yards. I have, let's see here, 4,435 yards for Stafford, 13 interceptions, and 27 touchdowns. That makes him quarterback 19.
Yeah, we're very close on that. Yeah. Why do you think he's going to run so much, Pat?
All those rushing attempts from, let's see here, 25 rushes for 59 yards. Good for him.
Oh, there you go. I got him for 21 rushes. That's the big difference right there.
So what do you make? Like, do you think Puka is a good pick, number 10 overall?
I don't hate it. I wouldn't want to push him much higher, but I don't hate it. I feel like the value, though, is that if Cooper Kupp's going to be the later of the 2, everybody at this point has seen it. And articles on Twitter, like wherever you look, everybody keeps posting. These are the numbers with Nakua and Kupp, and these are the numbers with just Nakua. They're not that different. They share so much. You just brought it up. It's the old Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce days of 60% goes to 2 guys, and that's why you can like both. But if you're going to tell me who do I want to pick, I'm just going to take the cheaper one, because why not? Like, what's the likelihood that if they both stay healthy for 17 games that Nakua improves on his draft position, as in return value, where Cooper Kupp does? My bet would be on the cheaper guy in Cooper Kupp. If it was reversed, I'd say take Nakua. But I feel like you kind of brought it up in your whole, like, everything broke right, is that Cooper Kupp also missed time. Granted, Nakua is a very good player. I mean, even as somebody who had him higher than most as a pre-draft player, wouldn't have expected this in 100 attempts. I wouldn't have projected that kind of season, even close to it. But how does it get better for Nakua? I think it's a rebound for Cooper Kupp versus Nakua is just a repeat.
What are the chances Cup outscores Nakua?
I'd say it's at least. Are we taking injury into it? Are you saying 17 games?
Yeah.
He plays 17 games. What are the chances? I say at least 50%, half.
Okay. What are the chances Cooper Kupp is washed?
I'm optimistic.
10%?
I think it's only like 20. I was going to say, I was going to be aggressive for you. I was going to say 15 to 20.
Okay, so like that, but there is that possibility, hence why he's going a lot later.
Yes.
All right.
But I don't think it's enough to not take him.
I like DeMarcus Robinson as a pick for free.
I don't see why people aren't taking him for free, especially. And if we're going to talk best ball, why not? He's going to have 5-6 games where he's in your line, like in your starting lineup in best ball.
Yeah, and it's usually just touchdown dependent, but they do like to throw to him in the red zone. So why not try to take? I mean, pay attention to the depth chart as we get through the preseason, because that's how Puka emerged last year and started being drafted over Van Jefferson at a very similar time, about a month from now. But not to say that DeMarcus Robinson's going to overtake those guys, but maybe there's someone on the roster who overtakes DeMarcus Robinson, and then he's completely irrelevant. There's always the chances of that happening. Are you surprised Blake Corum's being drafted so highly?
No, because you got a couple factors at play. So you have the concerns of Kyron Williams in his own right, and the fact of his size and being able to withstand 17 games of the workload that he was seeing. Then you have will Sean McVay give him that workload, because we know it's hard for a running back to stay healthy with 300-plus touches, let alone his size. And then you have the fact that Kyron Williams missed OTAs, and Blake Corum is getting all the praise. That last part, the fourth point there is that how many times are we going to do this, though? McVay's talked up everybody. He's talked up Jake Funk and everybody. Every running back he talks up. So I'm not putting too much weight into that. I'm just putting weight into the fact that this is one of those plays like years ago when you brought it up all the time, like D'Angelo Williams in case Le'Veon Bell gets hurt. If Kyron Williams goes down, if he does get hurt and he misses, like if he got hurt in week 3, I would blow your entire budget on Blake Corum, because you're talking about the offense and you're talking about Sean McVay does like to bell cow his lead running back. Whereas if Kyron Williams stays healthy for the entire season, I actually think that you're going to lose value on spending that on Corum, but you're not taking him there with that. If you understand that, and that's part of the things you and I talk about every single year too, if you draft Blake Corum when you do, and Kyron Williams stays healthy through the first 4 games, do not drop Blake Corum. That's not why you drafted Blake Corum. You didn't do it to use him as your flex piece. You did it in case Kyron Williams falters. And that's the upside of him. So I don't have a problem with it, but you have to understand if you're making that pick, that's why you're making the pick. You're not making it to be like, oh, I can use Blake Corum in my flex spot this week.
So Blake Corum in the 10th round, probably
totally okay with it.
Is he the best handcuff?
He would definitively, if without even trying to go off the top of our heads, top 5.
Yeah.
And I think there's an argument without trying to run through every single one that he is in the conversation to be the best. I think Algier, because we've seen Algier, but I mean, he's at least in that conversation.
I would just like the way that he would be utilized in this offense. Like you would expect Kyron to get his 20-plus touches a game. It does seem whoever the lead is going to be gets all of the touches for the Rams. And even if it's like 80-20.
Ronnie Rivers and Boston Scott behind him?
Yeah.
Like, really?
All right, let's move on to Seattle. New coaching in Seattle for this season. Mike McDonald is going to be the head coach. Ryan Grubb, who was the OC at Washington University, I think, for the last 2 years, is the offensive coordinator here, and it's another season of JSN. Probably going to see a much improved role. You have the backfield with Charbonnet. I'm just spacing on names today. Charbonnet
Ken Walker.
Ken Walker. Ken Walker, who everyone hates, yet everyone loves at the same time. He's like, this backfield is very confusing to me.
It is. I think part of it is because of Pete Carroll and how many times he messed with us with his backfield.
So how do you see this playing out? Because we have a new staff, and we have Geno coming back as the starter. But between DK, Lockett, and JSN, like, is this the end of Lockett? Is he just too old now?
No, I don't think he is. And I think writing him off is to the detriment of people in fantasy. Of course, yes, this could be the end. But because so many people think that, and so many people are excited for Jackson Smith and Jigba, and deservedly so in a talent perspective, like, Lockett's a value this year. And we talked about it a few weeks ago. Lockett last year, for the first time, didn't exceed his ADP and his finish at wide receiver, but was still a pretty good season for where he was. My biggest concern about this is everybody talking about what you just said with Grubb coming from Washington. And Washington passed top 10% of the time in a Power 5 conference and blah, 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 62. Seattle just came off 61.6% passing last year. Highest since, I mean, the last 10 years plus. I stopped looking because I'm like, at some point, I was like, is it really relevant to say, oh, it was 2004, they passed a little bit more. They're already a top 5 passing offense last year for everybody that wants to crap on Pete Carroll and what he was doing to this offense and holding it back. We're talking about only 4 teams, Jets, Vikings, Bengals, Commanders, passed more than they did last year. Do people really think it's going to go up that much? Now, I'm not saying it can't go up with Grubb, but how much more do you really think they're going to pass from last year for people making the argument of Geno Smith should be back into the top 10 conversation in a rebound season and all 3 wide receivers should be great? And so should Noah Fant. Like, just this entire team is going to like catch like thousands of balls and everybody's going to have 1,000 yards and Noah Fant or, yeah, it's Noah Fant's back. Yeah. So like, I just don't get it. I think it's still going to be 2.5 valuable pieces. Right now, Lockett is the value being disrespected, honestly.
Seattle's over-under is 7.5 wins. That's also juiced to the over, just like the Rams. And they're 7-1 to win the NFC West. I don't think that the Rams are markedly better than the Seahawks.
And hearing those numbers, the conversation even we just had, I said the Rams have the biggest range of outcomes, but telling me between the two, if I wanted to take a gamble on one that wasn't the 49ers, it'd be the Seahawks and not the 49ers. Let's not forget last year, Seattle had a good record. And they also ran through that midseason gauntlet. And I'm not saying that, like, you know, you can't throw that away, or should throw it away. But looking at their schedule this year, and I pulled it up, I mean, the midseason, I mean, they just don't face anybody 3-4 games in a row where it's like they can't rebound even an ugly loss. Like San Francisco sandwiched between the Giants and the Falcons, which is fine. But Falcons, Bills, Rams, okay, you could say divisional, but they get a bye week before they face the 49ers again. Green Bay towards the end of the year, but it's Arizona and Minnesota and Chicago around that. Like
they go on that run at the end of the year where they play the NFC North 3 consecutive weeks in weeks 15, 16, and 17 that, you know, if the NFC North isn't as good as we think, maybe the Seahawks could just pick up some cheap wins late.
And one of those teams is not the Lions because the Lions are all the way in week 4. So I'm just saying, the point being is, like, I'm not calling for the Seahawks to win the division, but if you told me, I 100% agree with your conversation about the Rams. If you told me I have to pick one of the two to take the gamble on, it would be the Seahawks and not the Rams.
Yeah, and more than double the odds. So to take a look at the ADP right now on Underdog, Metcalf, everyone kind of agrees is the guy to own from this team. He's going at pick number 27. That makes sense. After that, the next highest player is Kenneth Walker, pick 70, JSN 76, Lockett 99, Charbonnet 134, and then Geno at 168, Noah Fant at 171. To me, Charbonnet is kind of the pick here.
And at that spot, I like Geno too. And I already told you I like Lockett. I'm going to like all the late pieces. And to be honest, if we go back to the stacking conversation, if Grubb does push this team to throw 65, 66% of the time, this is a nice team to stack, including all 3 wide receivers if you wanted to, because right now, Lockett, you said pick 99?
Yeah.
Like, that's just value. It's kind of like the DeMarcus Robinson conversation, but for somebody who continually, even in this down year, was still wide receiver, 30, 31 last year?
I think so. I think he was 34 in points per game. But it's not that I like Walker that much more than Charbonnet. I just think the discrepancy between them, and then you play the injury bell curve that if anything happened to Mitchell, you like have a free running back 1.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, I mean, or Mitchell, you mean Walker?
Walker, yeah. I keep saying Mitchell.
Has Walker even, I was just about to pull that up. Has Walker even played a full season yet? No, he's missed time in both of his seasons so far.
Yeah, and he, like I said before, like he's a player that advanced stats both love and hate at the same time.
I know. There's a lot that loves him, but then you're like, he should be great in the short yardage, and he's like, why is he sucking the short yardage? And it's like it's kind of like he's bizarro stats. Like you look at the player and his ability and what he should do, and then like the stats are like the opposite of like what he's built to do.
Yeah, super strange. Let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals. I think they're a very fascinating team, and I think they're a team that punched above their weight last year. I think that Jonathan Gannon did a very good job as a first-year head coach and coaching up this team that was basically devoid of talent. And to take a look at their odds, they're 13-1 to win the division. Well, I don't think they're going to win the division, so I'm not too concerned about that. But their over-under right now is 6.5. So you had 8.5 for the Rams, 7.5 for the Seahawks, 6.5 for the Cardinals. They're kind of telling us that the Cardinals are in the mix with those teams.
And what we got 3 wins to break over top of that improvement from last year, and you tell me a full season of Kyler Murray, add Marvin Harrison, and I mean, you can't. You tell me that doesn't add 3 wins to this team?
Even signing like Zay Jones as a wide receiver 3, I think is better than having like Dortch and Rondell Moore.
I will say, since you went there first, I am not in the camp of trying to figure out who the hell if it's I'm a Michael Wilson guy. You know this. I don't care about Michael Wilson. Don't care about Greg George. Don't care about Zay Jones. I'm not sitting here trying to figure out the third option, who, argument's sake, is technically the fourth option because James Conner in that backfield is going to command enough to be the third option behind McBride and Marvin Harrison. And Kyler Murray's not going to throw 600 times. So everybody's like sweating it and be like, it's Michael Wilson. It's Greg Dortch. You're stupid. And Zay Jones and what he's able. No, I don't care. I don't care because it's irrelevant. It's almost kind of like trying to play the late career Deshaun Jackson and figure out every single week, or our boy, the tight end from the Saints, and trying to figure out every single week, like, who's it going to be? And you just keep picking wrong because that's how volatile it is.
Eric Ebron is the name you're looking for?
No, from the Saints. The one that we. Whoa! I just had his name, and it just
Taysom Hill.
He was in worst. No, he's worst place for the longest time with Mark Ingram.
Jared Cook.
Jared Cook, thank you.
He played for everyone.
He did.
He achieved worst place on the Titans. That's when he was his most maddening.
Yeah, but on the Saints, it was like, oh, he's facing the 32nd. The Cardinals at that time. It's like, just play your tight ends against the Cardinals. It's Jared Cook, 1 catch for 10 yards. And then it's like, oh, he's facing the 49ers. Tight ends haven't even scored 5 points against them. 70 yards and 2 touchdowns.
One thing I worry about with Kyler Murray as a fantasy player this year, and we saw it even when he came back, and I don't know if it was to protect him, but no team utilized the tush push, besides Philadelphia, as effectively as Arizona did. But they would usually bring in Clayton Tune to do that. And I think we're going to see that again, but we're going to see it with Desmond Ridder and not Kyler Murray, and make sure that he doesn't get hurt. That could lead to a big-time downtick in potential rushing touchdowns for both Connor and Kyler Murray.
So a little less concerned about Connor, but I also thought you were going to bring in the fact that you brought it up 2-3 years ago, or whatever it started, that Kyler Murray was running less. And I thought that was going to be part of it, which kind of ties into this. And that we're done with the Kyler Murray big rushing season. Now, he's still going to run. He's still going to put up yards. But the touchdowns / yards that we used to know, I could agree with you. I don't think we're going to see it there anymore just because the health doesn't need to. He's been hurt so much. And then you brought it up. You bring in a freaking Clayton Tune, and then you do have Ridder. So I'm not so worried about James Conner. I think you maybe even just hand the ball off more to him and Benson now. But I do have a little bit of concern where, even with you telling me 17 games, I don't try to play the injury game in my projections. I project everybody for 17 games, but even with 17 games, I only have Kyler Murray for 470 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, I have him for 504 yards and 4.7 rushing touchdowns. And even that feels a bit lofty. Like people draft Kyler Murray thinking they're getting a Lamar light, but they're not. Like Jaden Daniels
not anymore.
Will crush him on the ground.
Jaden Daniels should probably double him up if he stays healthy the entire season.
I think if everyone just plays 17 games, that Kyler Murray's rushing stats look more like Daniel Jones than Lamar Jackson.
I think worse. I don't like Daniel Jones, but if Daniel Jones played 17 games, Daniel Jones will have an extra 200 yards.
So in terms of fantasy, Marvin Harrison is going at pick number 13. Wide receiver number 9. You're good with that?
Oh, wide receiver 9? Slightly optimistic. We are talking about Marvin Harrison deserves to be in that conversation of generational talent, all that type of stuff. But I actually have him wide receiver 12, so that's a little high. I just don't know how you put him over. Who's directly behind him?
Drake London.
Do you have that?
I'd rather have Marvin Harrison than Drake London.
I would too, and I think we're actually on the short side of that argument, though.
Yeah, maybe. Have all the fun with Drake London that you want. I'll take Marvin Harrison instead. Trey McBride is tight end 3, pick number 47. I can see that. That makes sense to me, logically.
I think Trey McBride makes a lot of sense as tight end 3. I think Kelsey, in the argument to be back to number 1, he was actually just over 0.1 more than Laporta in points per game in his down year. So that's a whole nother discussion we already had. But Kelsey, Laporta, 1 or 2, 2 or 1. I think you're immediately talking about McBride in the conversation with Andrews as the number 3. And at this point, with how much Andrews has been banged up the past few years, Zay Flowers, the argument for the Ravens options, maybe they don't need Andrews to be that 25% target share as much anymore. Trey McBride is clearly the number 2, and that's why I was going to my whole argument about not worrying about who the third option was. I'm with you. If you want to take McBride 3, no problem. I have him at 3 or 4 right with Andrews, depending on your scoring format.
I see Trey McBride as fancy Evan Ingram.
Better answer.
Yeah, well, he's Evan Ingram with upside. Like, you get that, and maybe it changes with Harrison being in the mix, but there is a big target share to go around to him as well, higher percentage catches, and he can make a lot happen after the catch, which is not necessarily atypical of tight ends now, but it's not like every tight end can do. Like, Evan Ingram can't do that.
No, I agree. Where do you have McBride? I have him for 121 targets and 88 receptions.
I got him for 115 and 82. That's conservative.
So there you go. Yeah.
And that still puts him at tight end number 3 for me. So,
yeah, my projection of tight end 4, but he's narrowly behind Andrews and Laporta. Actually, the gap between Kelsey to Laporta for my projections, because I haven't played 17 games, that gap is bigger than Laporta, Andrews, and McBride all combined. Their gap.
Yeah, I have Kelsey and Laporta closer together, and then I have McBride a bit on of an island of his own, like 10 to 12 points above kind of that next like lump of 7 guys, whoever it might be.
Okay.
In the backfield, you got James Conner, who no one wants to draft again, like every single year. He is running back 26, pick number 93, and then Trey Benson is running back 31, pick number 109. So it seems like if you don't have a running back and you need to take one that's going to play, you take James Conner. And then if you're in the situation like we talked about with the Rams, where if you want to draft someone for your bench and potential stash upside, Benson's the guy that you go to.
Yeah, and at that value right now, I don't mind taking both, honestly. You and I talk about that a lot, too, and you've always been on that side of, like, I don't necessarily care about handcuffs because I agree with you, make the argument of, like, you still end up net 1, no matter what. If your guy goes down, well, congratulations, you still have 1. There's an upside for your argument of taking other people's handcuffs, which you always make, because you could say, well, if James Conner stays healthy, but I took Blake Corum, now I potentially have 2 top 15 running backs, and it's a valid argument. I've always liked that you bring that up. All that being said is the value here isn't bad for either one of them, and I really love the value in James Conner, who, by the way, once again, an RB1 in points per game, as you mentioned, with a pretty crappy situation that Gannon pushed this team through last year at quarterback and everything, and it's when he's healthy. The biggest problem is he legitimately doesn't have a healthy season to his career so far, but 13 games of RB1 numbers, I'm okay with it because I can find somebody else for the other 4.
All right. Any final notes about the Arizona Cardinals?
No, I like where's Kyler Murray in ADP at quarterback? I'm just curious because I don't think we touched on that.
87.
And that makes him QB
10.
11, I'm guessing?
QB 10. That's about where he should go.
Yeah, I don't hate this stack because you're able to get the value at running back too, if you wanted to include the running backs.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not super tied to Kyler either way. I think he's a fine value pick if that's what you want to roll.
Well, that's why I said value.
Yeah, I'm not reaching for him by any means.
No, but if you told me at their values, Murray, Connor, Harrison, McBride, because you have to pay up for McBride and Harrison, I don't hate this overall unit because you're getting the discount at quarterback and running back.
It's actually QB 7, pick 80 for Kyler Murray. I got him confused with Joe Burrow.
Well, never mind then.
Yeah, like you can have Dak 20 picks later. I'd just rather have Dak.
Oh, wait, and did you hear over the past 2 weeks? Dak is both the 20th best quarterback and also better than Herbert and Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. Did you hear this? He's the best of both.
All right, good. We'll just middle him out and make him number 10.
There you go.
Easy stuff.
Like we do every year.
TheAthletic.com is where you can find all of Jake's stuff. What do you have out already?
Finished my breakout series with the tight end, which surprisingly, breakout quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Do you know which one got the most angry comments and the biggest flack? Was tight ends of all of them. Like, I don't know what the hell is happening. Just finished that. I have a series arguing Dane, Barkley versus Taylor. I'm on the Taylor side. And then a deeper dive study on the increase of zone defenses coming out in a week or so and the wide receivers that exploit that.
Well, we are recording this a week early, so that should be coming out today at theathletic.com.
There you go. Today-ish.
Yeah. You can follow Jake at OwenKid on X. If you want more football coverage, stay on MMN and just go back through some of the old shows from the past few weeks. We have the intro to best ball, strategies, tips, mistakes to avoid, the best Best stacks, the worst stacks. Me and Davis ran through everything that you need to know to get yourself started, including tournament selection for Underdog Fantasy. Code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy, by the way. Chris Meany and I did quarterback rankings and running back rankings. All of his stuff is up at FTN Fantasy. And Jake and I have been breaking down each of the divisions. This is preview number 4. So we got 4 more to go, and there's going to be plenty of football coming in the near future when we flip the switch, Jake, at Mayo Media Network from golf to football and golf and MMA to MMA and then full-time football.
I'm glad you can keep track of that because you lost me there for a second.
I've been living it for like 10 years. It's all stored in my head.
I know.
Kenneth Walker's
Impressively,
name,
too.
not so much. My schedule, that's in my head.
Who are the at this point? Who do you think has more? You have more fancy shirts, or do I have more stupid T-shirts?
I mean, these aren't really fancy shirts. I get them all from Kurt River, if people ever want to know where I find my shirts. I just find that I like the floral stuff just because I find it's very bright. It's very active. I'm a pretty active person, moving my hands around all the time. I was once told in broadcasting school that make yourself on camera look like someone you would want to hear from if the sound was off. So I've always kept that in the back of my mind. Like if you're in a bar and you see someone talking on a sports show, would you be like, what is that guy talking about? I need to hear what he says. And like colorful, moving around, yelling, that kind of thing. Big eyes at the camera. All that stuff goes a long way.
Good to know.
Yeah, so you have to get eye enhancement surgery, put that on the docket before football season, and you will be good to go.
It just put the little overlays. Give us both like the anime. They're like those really like. There you go.
We'll TikTokify the show. Anyway, at the PME for me on Twitter, runthesims.com, completely free to use for your season-long projections, completely customizable. Code Mayo for the DFS product. If you just want the free product, just takes an email. So go to runthesims.com right now. Thank you all for tuning in. Sub to Mayo Media Network, and I will see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!